Welcome to the Nausea River podcast. I'm Theo Morgan, and my parents keep reminding me that 2025 will be my best year yet. As much as I want to brush them off, or, God forbid, avoid the curse that I brought upon the world by trying to make 2020 my year, why try to make a year bad on purpose? 2025 has a lot of promise. I just need to work for it. A lot of the personal stuff is probably not appropriate for this podcast, all of the goals involving love and dental work. So damn, maybe I should have said nicer things about Larcenia Row after all. That being said, there's more than enough about music and shows in enriching my humble podcast. Around this time of the year, my dad and I used to be really excited for the Boston Calling lineup announcement. 2023 maybe should have been our sign to reconsider it, but we weren't exactly comfortable with a fully indoor event, and the Foo Fighters were headlining that Friday. Plus, the local talent made up for it. We're both fans of Alyssa Amador and GA20. I even matched with Pat from GA20 on Tinder once, but he quickly walked back on that one. His loss, I guess. Look, if you're listening and your favorite band got booked for Boston Calling this year, I'm real happy for you. I have to remember that I'm 30 years old, and most of my peers have fond memories of Fall Out Boy and Avril Lavigne. I'm happy for Vivid Bloom. They got one of the Sunday slots, and they're one band to look out for. Plus, guitarist Liz Doom follows me. But big festivals are expensive, and even with the reduced pricing they promised this year, I'm not shelling out big festival money for bands I can tolerate or take a gamble on discovering. Even Vivid Bloom does smaller shows. My dad's money is on Solid Sound, the festival that Wilco puts on every year in North Adams. It's a hike, even for us, but we were a little crushed to miss Wilco, Jason Isbell, and dry cleaning all in the same bill. It was down to timing because my parents had rented a cabin in Yarmouth that same weekend. But secretly, my dad's willingness to see dry cleaning at the Paradise right before it made me feel better about the idea of indoor concerts at all. So I bought myself Septic Flush tickets and kicked off the chain of events that made me into a slightly established music podcaster. This year's different. I vowed to never let fear-mongering keep me away from concerts ever again. So what could a festival offer me now? Though, Solid Sound lets you bring your own lawn chair, so there's that. We'll see about Solid Sound. I know it's not a metal festival. Sometimes any genre is a good enough excuse for lying down on the grass. But for me, May is all about an evening of dark arts in Providence, where the sun won't shine. I discovered this little festival last year as May became a challenging month, a time of life's greatest pleasures and heartbreaks all within a few weeks, a time where I lost all sense of who I was and had to rebuild from scratch. I yearned for another metal show and figured that I liked Fall of Roros and Obsidian Tongue enough, the two higher-billed acts of the night. Set in the cozy darkness of AS220, it seeks to highlight New England's premier acts in dark music. Last year was black metal-oriented, but not exclusively. After all, it was the place I discovered 1476. And they had a poetry interlude with poet Benjamin Fortier and one of the guys from Obsidian Tongue playing some atmospheric synths in the background, which was really quite moving. There are vendors selling art there. It's an eclectic night for sure. Anyways, I feel comfortable hyping up this year's edition in Evening of Dark Arts 4 as Abaddon Booking finalized the lineup last week. Bands include Mourn, Lesser Glow, Marrowfields, Wormwood, and best of all, my friends at sea. It's a lineup that's more focused on doom and post-metal this year, which bodes well for me. Around here, it's been an easy niche pair of subgenres to make friends in, and seeing all these new names on the roster means I still have tons more people to meet. And if I beg and plead enough, I might be able to get my brother to join me. He lives in Providence, and he's finally started listening to this podcast too. So to Niall, about a dozen people are holding you to this promise now. Other festivals have yet to drop lineups. We're still doing Summer Gloom and Tough Luck this year, as long as everything pans out on their ends. What a great privilege to hopefully return to the places that established this podcast and cover them even better. Everything else I'm currently aware of involves travel, and I'm not sure how well equipped I am to do that right now. Then again, you didn't follow this podcast for travel vlogging. You're here because we're hoping Fitchburg Metal Fest does a second year. I missed it for Leprous last time, but this is my promise to my humble hometown. Hold it again and I'll be your hype woman. I finally set up a Songkick account. It's inexplicably connected to my second Spotify account, which is the one I use for managing distribution of this podcast and nothing else. It says I have 33 plans, but to be fair, some are tentative or on conflicting days. Everyone and their mother wanted to go to Emperor and Wolves in the Throne Room, or Napalm Death in the Melvins, so I'll just leave that at, I'll see you there. I also thought that the huge aborted and All Shall Perish show on March 1st would land in that category, but I figured I'd mentioned it for Nailed Shut on the bottom of the poster. Frontman Asher Thomas is familiar to you if you're a real Nausea River fan and listen to the Tough Luck episode. Like, this man's a jack of all trades and somehow a master of them too. As a former event photographer, his photography is my favorite venture of his, for what it's worth. Asher helped launch my podcast by talking to me for an hour, and this is the least I can do in return until September. There's stuff pertaining to other former interview subjects, too. Maidenhead do a lot more live dates than I expected. My choice is still their January 18th show at Kodo in Salem. Some of it is putting my money where my mouth is for doing good with metal. The other is for a proposed episode where I review venues that offer food, as Kodo is an Asian fusion restaurant. If I get that one out this year, I'll be eating good and probably not meeting my weight loss goals. So far, my list has Kodo, Deep Cuts, Middle East, and Ralph's if I can have a meat-eating friend lend me a hand. They have veggie burgers on their menu, technically, but we're talking about a place that serves chili out of a crock pot. I just don't trust their stock that much. Anyways, Maidenhead are also playing at Alchemy in Providence on February 21st as part of the venue's regular Night of Black and Death Metal series, and then later this year at Ralph's for the Stormbringer Festival. Between that and a new album that Zach promised, it's their year. Meanwhile, my buddies at Glacier are playing at O'Brien's Pub on January 31st, and even got another slot at the Post Fest in Indianapolis this July. And finally, Tears from a Grieving Heart have teased new songs, though I don't have a release date on hand. Or I'm a bad friend and forgot. Tours keep getting announced. I'm still processing that I get to see Paradise Lost and Trouble on the same bill in May. I was writing this script, and out of nowhere, Primordial gets booked at Ralph's Diner for March 19th. The only thing that would make that better is if we got Sonya opening for them too, but no, such pleasures are reserved for New York City. Coroner and the Cavalera brothers are booked for back-to-back nights in Boston just to test how much thrash metal I can tolerate at once. Though, to be fair, about 75% of the draw for the Cavalera show is Necrot being on that tour too. Now that's a band that kicks ass and deserves a low IQ circle pit with several casualties. I set up a Songkick account in hopes that I can join more friends at shows, though granted I'll be set for Aborted and Coroner no matter what. I clicked the wrong link and bought a scalped Alcest ticket instead of buying it directly, even though the show hasn't sold out yet. I didn't say this was an episode about my smartest choices. When I said that I was keeping my personal life out of this episode, well, I lied. My big resolution was to, and I quote, stop shopping online. The big one was that I actually have to patronize the Vietnamese grocery store near my parents' house for East and Southeast Asian pantry staples. Combing through its narrow aisles for rice noodles of every width is a lot more fulfilling than pressing a few buttons on Amazon or Wii. And believe me, I've pressed a lot of those buttons. No novelties, no impulsive tech buys, no clothes that I haven't tried on first, and no food or grocery delivery. Price Shoppers within walking distance and open until midnight. Fetch it yourself. That much I'm holding myself up to, but about a week in I ran out of dog food and caved. I have trouble finding the brand that I use in brick-and-mortar stores. It's been an issue since 2020. I'm not your shill for a pet food brand, especially because most of them seem greedy and soulless, but maybe I'll give more details if the music podcast doesn't pan out and I have to pivot to being a Chihuahua influencer. But it made me think about concert tickets. I almost never get paper tickets. Getting tickets mailed to me is an extra cost usually. Picking them up at a box office in Boston doesn't necessarily save me any money. Do you know what a commuter rail ticket costs, after all? Even with that, I thought about how I could potentially buy tickets in bulk on days where I find myself in Boston for other reasons. This one's open-ended, the milquetoast response of not being sure about taking a stance about how much Live Nation fucking sucks. And beyond the ridiculous fees, I just hate navigating the AXS app. Tickets are prone to selling out or otherwise using FOMO tactics. I was going to roll up to the My Missing Half show at O'Brien's on January 12th with cash at the door, but they started to warn us fans that capacity is limited to 50 people, and suddenly I'm breaking my own rules and buying a ticket online just in case. I didn't have to buy a scalped Alcest ticket, and it's embarrassing that I wasn't more discerning about links, but I had no choice but to look at the online resale market for Emperor. I'll see you there, but it hurt. It hurt a lot. Getting to Worcester via train from my area is even worse than getting to Boston that way. I'll do it for shows. I'll even do it to see mid-bands that somehow got the best support acts. That one is entirely about Mayhem going on tour with Mortis and Imperial Triumphant. See you there. I'll definitely do it to see one of my all-time favorite bands. I'm floored that Septic Flesh found the time and visas to tour the US twice in a year's time, and this time they get top billing. Somehow, a good year always starts with Septic Flesh, this time on February 28th. They occupy a place in my heart so grand that I'm willing to brush aside earlier shows from Alcest and Swallow the Sun as insignificant. And if anyone's looked at my listening patterns over the years, it's clear that I fucking love Alcest. Rob from 1476 and I had a whole tangent about Alcest in our interview. And here I am, still trying to find Septic Flesh fans, at least ones that will stay in my life. But last year, they broke my COVID-induced hiatus from indoor shows, as I said earlier. They marked the first time I ever stuck around to meet band members after a show, and I'd make my selfie with Spiro into my phone background if I wasn't so sweaty and drunk in it. I found out the legendary Great Scott was turned into a Taco Bell that night, so I guess it wasn't all good. I think this might end up being another year without new Septic Flesh music. But they're touring with Ex Deo, and I like their new EP well enough, even if the Roman Empire theming can sometimes come off as a bit corny. Wait, what's coming out this year again? Stuff, I guess. There's always big stuff in a year for the stars of the genre, though maybe it inspires less passion in me. I feel like people are finally feeling less guilty about liking Cradle of Filth, who are releasing a new album in April. I have no strong feelings about their music, never have, but I also never quite appreciated how they made black metal more accessible for a lot of people, and yes, I do consider that a good thing. I also didn't get into Ailstorm or Sabaton ever, but I know the hold both bands have on metalhead guys of a certain age. So yeah, new albums from them as well, though unlike Cradle of Filth, no release date. What tickles my fancy these days? Maybe it's what other people talk about, which makes me the most pointless music influencer, I know. But I have a few things I've been looking forward to since last year. Maybe they're smaller in terms of finding out who else cares, and big in the heart of those that do. One of the first black metal adjacent bands I got into was actually A Forest of Stars, an odd English band whose debut album The Corpse of Rebirth looked very appealing on now defunct blog full of foreshared links. Victorian black metal is a common descriptor I see for them, especially if they're gothic aesthetic. Maybe symphonic black metal, because that violinist is playing circles around the rest of the band. But I'm a sucker for real violin, and their music is a treat for my ears. Back in November, they promised new music on the horizon. Apparently 2020 and recording remotely set A Forest of Stars back a lot, which is funny because I listened to a lot of them in 2020. The shared news is vague, no album title or release date, but it's also been 6, nearly 7 years since Grave Mounds and Grave Mistakes. They had to retire as a live act and have to keep reminding us that they still exist. I want to have some hope there and not waste it. What about regulars who never deviate from an album release schedule? Last year was a great year for New Zealand death metal. It's a small country, so that just means everyone was putting Ulcerate's newest on their year-end lists, and I was fighting to spread the good word of Diocletian. But my favorite band from the country is Blindfolded and Led to the Woods, by far. As my pandemic isolation hit the 1-year mark in 2021, they unleashed nightmare withdrawals onto the world, and my album of the year was decided. Well, it ended up being a tie between that and New Longleg by Dry Cleaning. Very odd year. But they delivered death metal that always had an element of, what's that? An unusual melody, a dissonant riff, a surprise guitar solo from Carl Sanders of Nile. Oh, hell yeah. Rejecting Obliteration in 2023 was almost as good. Both albums are really good slices of avant-garde death metal that occasionally betray the deathcore roots of the band. That is to say, you still get a good breakdown every now and again, and it's not as challenging as their genre makes it out to be. When it comes to good commute or hiking music, that's not a bad thing. Some stuff fell through for Blindfolded and Led to the Woods, like the fabled US tour last fall. I'd have given up a few shows to make it possible, but that's not how life or the US visa system works. But they have been teasing the good stuff. New material. I'm not one to say a band is overdue for a new album, unless it's time to complain about no new Ohm material, but Blindfold and Led to the Woods have been doing well with the release every other year. It's a regular treat for me. Hooded Menace rounds out the smaller international bands I'm waiting for material from. They're a death doom band from Finland, the holy land of that sort of stuff. And funny enough, my downstairs neighbor is also a fan. Keep in mind, I live in a small town in central Massachusetts. I was even convinced for a few months that he was the infamous Metal Archives reviewer Web of Piss, who was a New England-based doom metal nerd. Though ultimately a lot of details didn't line up, and they've pieced out of online discourse. Maybe for the best, if you knew them. Tangents aside, Hooded Menace are a good entry in the genre, especially if you like your death doom to be a little closer to classic doom riffs, but with filthy growled vocals. Some of the best growls, if you ask me. It even feels out of place coming from Finland, the same country that gave us Thurgothan and Unholy, after all. I've definitely spent this year returning to my doom metal roots. Some of it's the friends I've made in Boston, some of it is wanting to connect with my brother more, as it's his favorite metal subgenre. What would be better than a new Hooded Menace album to welcome me back in? I'm gonna keep saying it, new Ohm, I'll fucking take anything. In general, I'm just looking forward to a year of being a more active person. I finally cleared out my big reasons for rotting in bed every weekend, and now it's time to ask hard questions about what I do with my free time, or why I still procrastinate on scripts. I'm sorry for any of the delays. I swapped out my mid-roll reads for begging for guests at the end, like I should have always done. I kid, I'm trying to network and get in contact with some great people. I think there will be some unique and fun episodes in the works soon, and it won't all be me playing food critic. Anyways, I'm Theo Morgan, and remember to cancel your gym membership in a few weeks.